My name is Niki Lemeshka, and I'm the Program Manager at the Georgia Commission on Family Violence. In light of the recent rise in domestic violence cases, I've been asked to provide some review materials on your obligations under Georgia law when responding to incidents of family violence. This will include primary aggressor identification. Remember from our last video that abuse most commonly is perpetrated on females by male offenders, so I'll be using feminine pronouns for victims. Again, this is not meant to imply that men cannot be victims. We know that to be the case. Family violence in Georgia is defined primarily in 3 statutes, and we'll be briefly reviewing all of them in the next few minutes. You'll recall that Georgia's statutory definition has 2 tests, the relationship test and the violence test. Loosely, 1913-1 defines family violence as a crime between individuals related by marriage, who've had a child together, who've resided together, or who meet certain parent-child relationships. To charge family violence, one of those relationships must be present, along with the occurrence of one or more of these listed crimes. OCGA 17420 allows you to make an arrest without a warrant when you have probable cause to believe that an act of family violence has been committed. And additional information about officer and agency responsibilities is found in 17420.1. This statute clearly states what the officer shall do whenever they receive a reported incident of family violence. The Georgia court has been clear that shall is a directive. This means that every time, as an investigating officer, you are required to respond to the incident, investigate the incident, and document the circumstances in a family violence incident report. As a reminder, you play a vital role in connecting victims to supportive resources and safety planning. Please remember that you should notify victims that they can receive confidential support through their local domestic violence program, and note that referral in your incident report. Both our state law and best practices require that in family violence cases, when there are opposing stories, and let's face it, there always are, the officer is to interview each party separately to attempt to identify the primary physical aggressor. Georgia is not a mandated arrest state with regard to family violence incidents. The statute is clear in allowing you the ability to arrest one party, even if both parties have used violence. It's very uncommon to respond to incidents where a man and a woman have engaged in consensual mutual combat. It's not impossible, but certainly it is rare. Appropriately identifying the primary physical aggressor and charging that person accordingly is the most effective intervention in family violence incidents. So let's talk about primary physical aggressors. Many officers hold the belief that primary only means first, but in this circumstance, that's not the case. In Georgia statute, primary refers to the main or predominant aggressor. All evidence must be considered before making a determination of who should be considered the primary physical aggressor. Simply striking, slapping, or pushing first does not automatically make that person the primary physical aggressor. One party may initiate the contact and then be seriously assaulted by the other. Once a person exceeds the force necessary to stop the infliction of further injury, self-defense can likely no longer be claimed. In cases where both parties use violence, if you can determine that one party is the primary physical aggressor, then the arrest of both parties is not appropriate. Many different factors must be considered for a primary physical aggressor assessment. Think back to when we talked about the cycle of violence. Remember that domestic violence is typically a pattern of behavior. Rarely will you be responding to the first incident of violence. So while it may take a little bit of extra time, obtaining information about those past experiences actually makes your job easier. In a relationship where one party has used violence and intimidation regularly, a pre-established threat level usually exists. In other words, a victim may respond physically to what they perceive as an impending assault. Because of that, context is incredibly important here and will be a clue in identifying the primary physical aggressor. You must consider the party's actions with regard to the totality of the relationship and the abuse history. Assessment of physical size and strength must also be considered. You should pay close attention to the demeanor of each person, not only how they respond to each other, but how they react to you. If children are present, observe their demeanor as well. Weapons can also provide a strong clue into determining the primary physical aggressor. If the allegation is that the weapon or object was used in self-defense, consider the availability of the weapon to the incident location. If the assault occurs in the kitchen, a defensive weapon of choice might be a knife or glassware. If the assault occurs in the living room, a lamp or decorative object of some sort might be used. The weapon should fit the location. If that knife or lamp are used against someone in the bathroom, it's time to ask more questions. In cases where both parties have injuries, the injuries themselves may provide better clues to the primary aggressor than the testimony of the parties. Be aware of areas such as the hairline, ears, and anywhere that could not be readily seen while the victim is clothed. Ask them if they hurt anywhere else or if they remember being struck anywhere other than where injuries are visible. Certain injuries only occur in certain ways. Scratch marks on the victim's neck are often indicative of strangulation, especially if they're accompanied by red eyes, petechia, or difficulty swallowing, breathing, or speaking. Injuries will show up on the victims as bruises, scrapes, swelling, and redness, often located on the face, arms, chest, back of the legs, and small of the back or head. Thinking through what we know these incidents look like, it's common for victims to curl up into a protective position during a physical assault. That means that the incident may result in kicks to the legs, buttocks, arms, or head. Victims may even have abrasions from the abuser's shoes. Injuries on the suspect may provide you with the clearest picture of the incident because victims often use teeth and nails to defend themselves. Defensive scratches will be location specific. The scratches will typically start as a nail dig and then taper off as scratch marks. Nail digs of this nature are virtually always close proximity defensive injuries. The scratches will most commonly be to the face, shoulders, chest, and upper arms of the suspect. A fingernail dig between the thumb and forefinger is often indicative of strangulation, especially if it is accompanied by scratch marks to the victim's neck. This is created as they attempt to pull the abuser's hands away from their neck. No matter what the story is, consider the reality of it. No matter what the manicure looks like, people don't typically just run across the room and dig their nails into their partner as their weapon of choice. Similarly, unless we're talking about a child, people don't generally run up to someone and bite them on their chest. It's just not a practical way to inflict harm. Teeth are ineffective as offensive weapons. Your teeth don't project beyond the plane of your face, so you have to willfully slam your nose and chin into the person you're trying to harm. Again, this just doesn't make sense as a weapon of choice. Victims may, however, bite their attacker in self-defense. Defensive bite marks tend to be location-specific. If a victim uses her teeth to defend herself, the suspect may have bite marks to the face, chest, bicep area, forearm, groin, or even inside the hand. Bite marks to these areas are close proximity defensive injuries, often occurring while the victim is being restrained. You'll remember from the cycle of violence that abusers are masters of manipulation. They use manipulation to convince the victim to stay, and they'll use some of those same tricks on you. They'll often express sadness or regret for the victim's situation, and may try to get sympathy from you by pointing out all of their faults. They may present themselves as the innocent victim who's only trying to help their partner who's drug or alcohol addicted. They'll often tell you that their partner is crazy, possibly even bipolar and off their meds. Abusers may claim provocation or self-defense as a reason for their violence. They'll also try to minimize the incident, even apologizing to you for having to come out on such a silly thing. The primary aggressor seldom takes ownership for their role in the violence. So now let's talk about some clues that the person you're talking to might be the victim. Victims often minimize or deny the incident in an effort to protect the abuser. This makes perfect sense when you consider that they've often called 911 to make the abuse stop, not to see their relationship end or the partner go to jail. If the victim has used violence in the incident, they often take ownership and responsibility for it. They may apologize and say things like, "It wasn't his fault, I should not have whatever," or "He didn't really mean to do it, it was my fault." The fact that the victim often admits to their use of violence when the abuser often denies their own is precisely why Georgia law does not mandate arrest in every case. Instead, it allows you to make a determination of who the primary physical aggressor is. In closing, I just want to say thank you for doing the tough job that you're charged with. A lot of the calls you take are both difficult and dangerous, and you're expected to be an expert on every area of the law. Thankfully, I only have to focus on one, family violence. So please know that you're always welcome to contact the Commission if we can be assistance to you in this area. Thank you for all you do. Stay healthy and stay safe.